In this presentation, you will learn about post-colonial critique. Colonization. Colonization is a systematic process where certain countries, groups left their homeland and slowly, systematically encroached upon other countries and imposed their policies upon the other. Generally, it is a group from France, Portugal, Britain. Often it is associated with a white race. They began this journey by trying to build trade relations with the host country. In other words, people who have crossed a sea with salt water to reach another land than their own. Given this background, let us look into understanding what post-colonialism is. Post-colonialism is the historical period that focuses upon representing the aftermath of Western colonialism or imperialism. It also includes criticism of the colonial period. Post-colonial writings began in the 1990s. Today, it is a separate field of literature too. Post-colonial theorists and historians have been concerned with documenting the consequences of modernity on philosophical, cultural, and historical perspectives. Post-colonialism is nothing but a general field of intellectual inquiry. Post-colonialism combines several disciplines like literary theory, cultural studies, philosophy, geography, economics, history, and politics. One of the most important features of the history of imperialism has been the emergence of states either from the territories and politics or from the dissolution of empires or by making the combination of both. Hence, post-colonialism has to be seen from the perspective of the emergence of political thought too. Post-colonialism at times has also been used to refer to the struggles of indigenous peoples in different parts of the world in the early 21st century. Post-colonialism focused on criticizing colonial writings. The first phase of post-colonial criticism was written by M. Caesar, Franz Fanon, Edward Said, and Gayatri Spivak. More recently, a new generation of academics has provided fresh assessments of the interaction of class, race, and gender in cultural production. Scholars Ejaz Ahmed, Bell Hooks, Homi Baba, Abdul Jan Mohammed, and David Lloyd are also represented by scholars. Topics covered include negritude, national culture, Orientalism, subalternity, ambivalence, hybridity, white settler societies, gender and colonialism, culturalism, Commonwealth literature, and minority discourse. History of post-colonialism. The post-colonial theory emerged in the US and UK among academicians in the 1980s. It was a part of a larger wave of new and politicized fields of humanistic inquiry, especially with feminism and critical race theory. Post-colonial theory came due to the anti-colonial thought from South Asia and Africa in the first half of the 20th century. It is an outcome of several social movements. Over the past 30 years, this discipline has been reimagining politics and ethics from underneath imperial power. It is an effort to write about those who continue to suffer colonization effects. The post-colonial theory has been discovering and theorizing new forms of human injustice from environmentalism to human rights. Post-colonial theory has influenced the way we read texts, the way we understand national and transnational histories. Despite frequent critiques from outside the field, the post-colonial theory remains one of the key forms of critical humanistic interrogation in both academics and the world. Enlightenment and post-colonial writing. One of the important themes in post-colonial writing was criticizing the Enlightenment tradition. Some scholars saw certain aspects of Enlightenment thought as Eurocentric and thus deeply problematic when applied in non-European contexts or presented as offering genuinely neutral principles of political association or justice. Yet, Enlightenment continues to play an important role in policies to address global inequality. Post-colonialist theories believe that the dominant and important European process of modernity has multiple modernities rather than just one. The post-colonial theorists viewed the Orientalism writings as problematic as they wrote the Asian cultures from their scale. They used words like primitive, archaic to describe cultures other than their own. On the other hand, while writing their history, they used the terms advanced, civilized. Some Indian historians associated with subaltern studies used Marxist perspective to explain the Indian peasant struggle. For example, Ranjit Guha, A.R. Desai. Foucault discussed the complex relationship between knowledge and power. He described it through the example of asylum in his book. He wrote about how deviant people are treated as a threat in society and boycotted and segregated. In a way, he questioned the Western rule and the knowledge itself and the producers of knowledge. Fanon, a psychoanalyst and philosopher, had made a provocative analysis of the relation between colonized and colonizer in The Wretched of the Earth, as well as in his Black Skin, White Masks. Fanon remains perhaps best known for his explosive justification of violence in The Wretched of the Earth, highlighted by John Paul Sartre's preface to that work, where it is cast as the appropriate response to the violence perpetrated by colonialism and as the mediation through which had been colonized. Colonization and identity has been discussed in his writings. Post-colonialism critique of modernity. Colonialism focused on making a singular history of the world that is more than simply a collection of the particular stories of different communities. It is through text, encyclopedia, education, media theories like evolutionary theory. The post-colonial thinker's task is to rethink modernity in the context of this new data and develop paradigms that have their own history as a consequence of colonization. The challenge is perhaps greater to sociology than to history, a challenge to reconstruct the conceptual architecture of the discipline and its foundational understanding of modernity. Post-colonial critique of archaeology. There exists a hierarchical relationship between the post-colonial critique and the field of archaeology, a discipline that developed historically in combination with European colonialism and imperialism. Hence, scholars representing indigenous and minority communities and impoverished countries suggest strategies to rewrite its colonial heritage's archaeological theory and practice and create an equally sensitive discipline. The research is to identify current trends and chart future directions in post-colonial archaeological research. These work contain multiple voices and case study approaches and have consciously aimed to recognize the utility of comparative and interdisciplinary approaches to understanding the past. Criticism of post-colonial concept. There are several important questions we need to ask. Is colonialism really over? The idea of a post can apply. Can we use the term post-colonial? Still, Shakespeare is taught in colleges. Scholars, scientists' opinions, texts are still taken seriously. In a country like India, English is taught in school, internet users are highest in English. The post-colonial writers said that the native language has to be used. However, we will speak English to a large extent. Post-colonial writers are being criticized as they also studied and located themselves in a binary view, central self and decentralized. There is otherness and other, thereby defining and delimiting themselves in Baba or Said's works. It's kind of a victim stand and structuralism stand, colonizer and colonized as an opposition. There could be certain good relations and benefits, not in all parts, but the colonized has benefited in some parts. However, the percentage of discrimination could be higher too. One more argument or question we can ask is whether the real problem is that of colonialism or if all over the world we are in the process of globalization. Another criticism is the bias of writing about women in post-colonial period. Mainly the post-colonial writers studied in the West and were men, so there could be still a loophole in the claim of post-colonial representation. Thank you for watching the presentation.